The Kamloops First Nation that misled the world 3 years ago into believing that 215 Indigenous children were found buried in unmarked graves near a former residential school in British Columbia now wants to keep whatever they have found a secret. Don't like that? Then you may be racist. Let's talk about it.
We are committed to reconciliation. We are committed to truth. We are committed to being there to help Indigenous communities understand the past and move forward into the future the right way. And as they make requests, as there is a need for discovering more, we will continue to be there. We haven't looked at exactly what the process is or the needs are entirely, but Canada will be there to support Indigenous communities as we discover the extent of this trauma and try to give opportunities for families and communities to heal.
It's been 3 years and 7.9 million tax dollars later, and yet, contrary to what the world was told in 2021, not a single body has been discovered in an unmarked grave at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School. On the other hand, approximately 100 churches have been burnt or vandalized across the country since the Secwépemc First Nation first made its 215 dead children claim. But no one really wants to talk about that now, do they? Speaking of not wanting to talk about things, the band's chief cookbee, Rosanne Casimir, recently deflected looming questions about what actually has or hasn't been discovered on the former KRS school grounds by claiming the findings need to be top secret. And like a true social justice warrior, followed that up with the suggestion that scrutiny of such is fueled by racism and white supremacy. Let me explain. Last week, we informed you that May 27th marked the third anniversary of the Kamloops band's initial claim, which read that the remains of 215 children who were students of the school, some as young as 3 years old, had been found discovered in unmarked graves by way of ground-penetrating radar. Except to honor that anniversary this year, the band government closed its office for a day of reflection and released a statement which significantly backpedaled from the claim without much explanation for why they hadn't gotten it right in the first place. It read that on May 27, 2021, the band confirmed an unthinkable loss that was spoken about but never documented by the school. With the help of ground-penetrating radar specialists, the stark truth of the preliminary findings came to light, and the confirmation of 215 anomalies were detected. Anomalies. You mean like something that's unclear but different than soil underground, right? Anomalies that could be tree roots, or as my colleague Adam Sosk covered before, old septic plot. And this claim still doesn't tell the public what my documentary from 2 years ago called Kamloops: The Buried Truth explained, which is that there was never a possibility for them to have discovered 215 bodies solely by GPR. And the so-called expert Dr. Sarah Bollier that conducted the investigation, claiming that it could, definitely had enough experience to know better, but instead shut down the RCMP's questioning of her with the help of former Senator Murray Sinclair by complaining the big bad police were being heavy-handed and intimidating for doing their job. But the band isn't the only ones quietly backpedaling without clearly correcting the record. Of course, the state choice media, who, unlike Rebel News, parroted their sensational claim as truth from the start, has been doing so as well. For example, our commander-in-chief, Ezra Levant, posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, that City Vancouver News misled the public for a full day last week by regurgitating falsehoods and stating that the anniversary marked the grim discovery of hundreds of unmarked graves discovered at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. The disinformation was published nearly a full 24 hours, that is until X users did journalism for them and corrected the false narrative through community notes. No remains have been recovered, nor have any graves been identified. So what did the publication do? Poof! No correcting the record, they just made it disappear. And is that what the band government wants to do with Canadians' questions about why they made the false claim in the first place and what actually lies beneath the soil? Make them disappear? It sure seems like it. You see, much like the band government blocked the RCMP and BC coroners from investigating the site of the so-called discovery, the people are now being told they will be blocked from getting answers about what actually has or hasn't been discovered so far via their investigation, even though it's been 3 years in the making and the feds have admitted to giving the band nearly $8 million to help them uncover their stark truth. That's right. Unlike the bands that also publicized unmarked grave claims after the state promised to fund Kamloops First Nation for such, but at least dug in the soil to uncover nothing, Chief Casimir now says the findings of their investigation, which for some reason is being led by a special interlocutor named Kimberly Murray, are top secret. In another statement recently made by the band to its members, community, and allies, Casimir says, the investigation continues to be carried out in compliance with the Secwépemc laws, legal traditions, worldviews, values, and protocols, and that the findings of the investigative steps are being kept confidential to preserve the integrity of the investigation. But not to worry, you are to accept the promise of the chief who signed off on the false 215 buried Indigenous kids claim that what this interlocutor has found is consistent with the presence of unmarked burials. And the top secret investigation includes archival and documentary research and analysis, truth-telling from KRS survivors, more surveys and studies with no clear promise of an excavation, and potential, aka possible, DNA and forensic methods. So what then of the people, the healthy skeptics, who are starting to doubt that there are any missing Indigenous kids buried at that former school and are raising eyebrows as to why a band that's accepted $8 million in tax dollars under the claim that there was is keeping secrets? Well, if that's you, you better watch out. You might be a racist engaging in residential school denialism, a term gaining traction with those seemingly seeking to scare truth seekers away from digging too deep, no pun intended. Politicians like NDP MP Leah Gazin, who has even used the term to call for the expressing of such a theory to be deemed hate speech. Or politicians like Chief Casimir, who, after giving no promise of excavation or informing the public on what the heck is actually going on there, went to encourage citizens to refute the very real harm caused by denialists. She stated, there have always been those who target Indigenous people in Canada with systemic racism and white supremacy as foundational to Canada as the very federal laws that ripped our children away from home in cattle trucks and police cars to bring them to residential schools. You see, only a madman couldn't sympathize with some of the families whose children were taken from them by force to attend residential schools. Emphasis on some. It's well documented that many Indigenous parents chose for their children to attend those schools. And anyone who did abuse a student at those schools should have been held accountable. But why no accountability for the false 215 claim that led to attacks against Christian places of worship, widespread hurt, and shame for people who had nothing to do with residential schools, and more questions than answers 3 years later? And also, why is Casimir implying that those who struggle to believe her, considering all of the above, are white supremacists? Even if her band government does excavate and find nothing, which, by the way, would be good news instead of the 215 horror story being taught to kids in schools, would the public get a straight answer about why that is? Or would a new claim be made to excuse away further scrutiny, like BC's regional chief Terry Teague seems to already be preparing the public for?
Could you talk about the prevalence of these burial sites and how many do you think we expect to find in BC?
The potential, I'm not sure. But at the same time, some of these residential schools or these institutions also had incinerators, so there could be potential not finding any remains of children that have gone missing.
Drea Humphrey for Rebel News. Just like the Kamloops ban, we don't actually know what is beneath the surface near the school. But we do know we will tell you the truth and the facts of whatever is available the whole way through. If you haven't already saw my investigative documentary that on the year anniversary, when it exposed a truth that should have been told from the start about what hasn't been discovered at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School, head to our special website called kamloopsdocumentary.com to watch and share.